Hello from Gardening at Douentza here in Ireland, and you're very welcome to this July update. So this is part of my series, A Year in the Life of a Border, and it's July and it's time to have a look at the green border, which is this one here behind me, and see how it's been in July. So let's get on with the video. So you're very welcome to the video, and I'm going to give you a rundown of the plants that are looking great this month in just a few moments. But just as way of introduction, I want to say that July has been a really terrible month here in Ireland. It has bucketed down rain for a whole load of the time, and it's been very difficult to keep the flower show on the road, because with all that rain the flowers ball and they go over so much quicker than they would normally. So putting that aside, I guess the thing to really note in July is how fantastic the lilies are. And July for me at Douentza is a time of the lilies. And it's a funny story, because several years ago I was very enamoured with dahlias and grew so many in the garden. And then we had a really bad winter. I used to leave my dahlias in the ground. We had a really bad winter and I lost so many of them, and at that point in time I discovered lilies in earnest, and I do love the tall scented oriental lilies like these ones you see here, and aren't they just amazing? So these lilies really make a statement at the back of the border, and their scent wafts around so magnificently. I guess I've chosen quite a muted colour palette back there with the kind of pale creams, but I think they go quite well with the silphium. Now the silphium, well, that's another story. You'll have seen me stake it, I think, in the last video, but I certainly didn't stake it strongly enough, because these big bad boys have started falling down, like coming forward, and I had a good look at them and just decided that there is nothing more I can do. The original stakes are in place, so they're not going to fall any further at the moment, and if I tried to fix it I would have just made it worse. So a note for me next year, just to stake them more securely somehow. But anyway, they're staying put for the moment, which is great, but there will come a point in time when more of these big yellow flowers open up, where the spikes will become heavier and I'm going to have to prematurely cut them back. But so it goes. And for the moment I can just say that the lilies and the silphium together, well, they do just look wonderful at the back of the border. So I guess I'm starting over here at the front of the greenhouse, and look how nicely camouflaged it is during the month of July. I've just got so much growth that really softens the whole look of it, which is exactly the plan. And just moving to the right here, you can see the border that we're talking about today, what I'm calling the green border, and we're just really looking at a very green mass in front of us, which is the Daphne, the tall shrub there at the back, finished flowering long ago, and the Euphorbia down below. And at the front left here, the heucheras are just mixing up the colour scheme a little bit, adding a little injection of dark red, which is very welcome, and they're in flower at the moment. And moving over to the right, we have the Celmisia, which is coming to the end of its flowering. So one of the things I've been doing this month, especially more recently, is deadheading. So any of the flowers that start to look a bit moth-eaten, they get snipped off at the base. And the general rule of thumb for deadheading is to cut back to something. So in the case of this Celmisia, we're cutting back to pretty much the base of the spike. And travelling up from the Celmisia, we have those amazing lilies. which are, well, they're not completely open yet, but a lot of them are. And travelling down from the lilies, we have Leucanthemum, which is looking really fabulous, and the bees and the butterflies and flies as well are just loving it. So this is another one I've been assiduously deadheading, because the flowers do get to look quite scruffy as they fade. And here we can see that that particular flower there, this one, is looking quite brown. And if I snip that down to the first set of leaves, then it just generally improves the appearance of the whole clump. Now you will recall the Leucanthemum was staked earlier on in a previous video. Do you see those little peony hoops in there? Just barely visible, and that's the trick to good plant support, to good staking. You really shouldn't see the stakes much at all. And just to the right of Leucanthemum we have a variegated daylily or Hemerocallis, and this benefits from a bit of deadheading as well. Now, deadheading with daylilies, as I mentioned in my deadheading video, is really just about snipping off or breaking off the spent flower heads, and they come off quite easily, just being very, very careful not to break off any of the unflowered buds. And there we go, just a moment's work, and that looks a whole lot better. Now, the flowers of this particular daylily aren't very showy for my money at all. It's really all about the foliage. And just to the right of the daylily, you will have noticed those vibrant yellow, almost orange flowers. And look at the bee on there. It's wonderful when bees and insects love our flowers. It just kind of, it's a great feeling, you know, because we all like to feel we're part of nature and we're contributing our bit to the health of the planet. And I think gardening is just a wonderful way to do that. So here we have the tall spikes of the Ligularia, and if you like, you can cut out the flower heads as they go over. This is really a choice thing. Some people kind of like to leave them. If you do cut off the flower heads, then you're going to avoid the plant seeding around the place. Now, this one isn't a seedy one, but some of them are. So it's really up to you how you want to manage it. So you see, if you like, you can cut out these spent flowers, or you can just leave them. I love this one, and I love its foliage particularly. Aren't they fabulous leaves? And you have to remember, we're looking at pretty flowers now, and they very much take the show. But for so many other months in the year, we're looking at the foliage. So you really need to choose a plant with good foliage. And before you ask, yes, I don't have a lot of slug marks, and I really don't have a solution for getting rid of slugs in the garden. I guess I just have a very slug-free garden. Maybe it's down to the stony soil. Just slightly to the right again, we have my pots of calla lilies, and these, I guess, are coming to the end of their flowering. Still looking good. I'm still removing any spent flowers so that the pots continue to look well. These are tender plants, of course, that will need to come in winter, and I'm just moving up here to show you this amazing salvia. Now, this one really looks fantastic when the sun gets behind it. It becomes almost translucent and like a goblet of sun, and I absolutely love it against the dark foliage of the Ligularia just there to the left. Now, this is a salvia that seeds about the border and I let it dance wherever it wants. Well, nearly wherever it wants, but it's always a nice surprise when one pops up. And I think where it's decided to seed itself here is quite good. Now granted, when you zoom in you can see that the flowers are less than perfect. There are some brown edges to them, but with this one I think it's one that you need to enjoy from standing back and not going too close with the little magnifying glass. And to the right there of it we have the Lychnis coronaria that I made a separate video about not very long ago, and I think the two together they really do look quite wow. And speaking of wow, take a look at this Echium here, which is going for world domination, I think. Now it's not terribly tall at the moment, I guess it's 3 foot, but we all know the way these things go. And I think by next year I will have the tall blue spires that will rival even the lilies there behind. But I'm moving too fast because we very nearly missed something exciting right down here. Can you see it? Now you might be mistaken for thinking I'm growing pineapples, but I'm not. I'm growing Eucomis, and you may recall that last winter I made an experiment and I left this Eucomis in the ground. I did cover it with a clay pot, but I left it in the ground all winter because I was fed up with it never flowering. And yeah, it has decided to flower. Obviously it needed to be shown who was boss. And here we have the flower on its way up. And yeah, I'm so delighted with this. I just have one flower from, I think, I don't know, maybe I have about 5 growth points down below, but it's a really good sign. This is a plant I'm not going to be throwing out because, well, just look at it. It's fantastic, a really exotic kind of bit of bling in the middle of the border. And just behind it we have the first of the dahlias that I planted in this border. So this is a miniature one called Roxy, and it is just opening. Very nice because it has the glorious dark foliage that we all covet. And not very long ago it was floating on this sea of Gypsophila there to the right. So the Gypsophila has finished flowering now and it does need to be cut back. You can see the dahlia just through the Gypsophila there, and well, if I cut back the Gypsophila then I guess we'll be able to see it a bit better. And here you get a glimpse really of the overall appearance of the border, with big plants looking really good and coming into their own now and really obscuring the greenhouse. And that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted this border to integrate the greenhouse into the garden and make it a thing of beauty rather than just something that's obviously man-made and sticks out like a sore thumb. And when we get to July, I think the greenhouse really is an integral part of the garden, the engine room of the garden. So a lot of yellow going on there with the lilies and the silphium, and we can see some pink there in the middle, which is the eupatorium, just getting going, and some of it is extremely tall this year. We have at the very front Melanoselinum, decipiens, which will flower next year, I reckon. And over on the right we have a hydrangea, and this is Hydrangea macrophylla Ayesha, which is quite unusual, quite different to other macrophyllas in that I guess just the way that the flowers present is a bit different. And I really love it. I think it's a great one. And what I love about hydrangeas as well is that generally speaking the foliage does well. So you get these lovely lush green leaves that don't look tired. I mean, unless you have them in full sun and it's a scorcher of a summer, but they don't look tired at this stage in the game. And I think, well, I really just like hydrangeas. And obviously there to the right we have the greenhouse, which you can see the backs of the staging in there. Just at this end, you can't see them at all further up because it's just completely obscured by plants. Speaking of Echiums, I just have to show you this funny little thing I found over here, and it's in this tree trunk that I am about to plant some climber up. Yeah, so an Echium has decided to seed itself in there in the leaf litter. I just wonder how far it'll get because there can't be much of a root run in there. And just a little word on work to be done in this border in July. And I just want to, I suppose, really state out something that might be obvious to you, but I'll say it anyway, that the large sections of the border with dense planting, like where we're looking now, really take care of themselves. So it's so important that you get your soil covered by May, I believe it is, that's the recommended time, so that with the canopy of plants they kind of shade out any seedlings and they struggle and then they disappear, so you don't have so much work to do. However, there are always areas like, for example, over here. So here the border is less densely planted, and that's in part due to the fact that this was difficult to plant with the shade of that big tree I've taken out. So you have areas like this you do need to weed. I've hand weeded this quite recently with my rake, and it's just something that needs to be done, especially with my type of gardening, which favours self-seeders, and the Echiums of course would be the devil for seeding about. So it's actually plants that I'm weeding out, self-seeding plants, but that's okay. You know, I prefer to be pulling out plants than weeds any day of the week. And leaving that ugly tree trunk there on the right, which I will get around to planting something up before very long, just giving us a final pan of the border. And here I am, just standing right back in a border so that we can stand back far enough to get the whole thing into shot. So I hope you enjoyed this July update on the green border, and you'll check back for the August edition. And also, if you watch my videos and watch my garden tours, then perhaps you will start thinking about which border you'd like me to spotlight next year. I'll do another year in the life of a border next year, choosing something different. So take a look around some of my garden tour videos, and if there's a particular border that you think it might be interesting to follow through the year, then let me know. And that brings me to the end of this video about July in the green border, which I hope you enjoyed. And perhaps if there's a particular plant that you liked, it might inspire you to go look for it and maybe plant it in your own garden. And if you have any questions about care of any of the particular plants seen in this video, then feel free to jot those questions down below. Okay, so I will see you again at the end of August, when we will see, among other things, if that Silphium is still standing at the back of the border. And in the meantime, thank you so much for your support, and well, have a wonderful, wonderful August. Bye!